November 12, 1943. A small rain-slicked side street in the quiet Parisian suburb of Neuilly-sur-Seine. The damp air smells of coal smoke and old bread. A worn Citroën traction. Avant, its headlights dimmed by mandatory blackout slits, slows to a crawl. Inside, a man in a poorly fitting trench coat, Oberleutnant Klaus Richter of the Abwehr, chews nervously on a cigarette. He watches the window of a 3-story limestone building, number 17, Rue Guinemer. The building is unremarkable, save for the fact that it houses the wife of a man Richter believes is a key operative in the British Special Operations Executive, SOE, a man the Gestapo calls the architect. Richter tightens his grip on the Webley revolver in his coat pocket. He knows a direct raid is out of the question. The security around this target is an unnerving blend of British cunning and local innocence. They are here for one thing: a laundry basket. At the front door of number 17, André Borel, a small, energetic woman known to her neighbors as a dutiful wife and mother, lifts the heavy wooden basket containing the week's wash. She is 24, with sharp, watchful eyes that miss nothing. Her heart is a frantic drumbeat against her ribs, but her expression is one of mild annoyance at the rain. Today is the day she transfers a vital shipment, not of socks and linens, but of the most closely guarded secrets of the Allied war effort. She pushes the door open, stepping out into the street. The heavy fabric of her skirt brushes against the contents of the basket. Beneath the outer layer of damp sheets, carefully folded and secured with safety pins, are 2 sealed wax paper parcels. The new edition of the SOE's B cipher codes and a complete manifest of upcoming parachute drops into the Loire region. If Richter and the Abwehr get their hands on this, the entire French resistance network could be compromised within 48 hours. André takes a steadying breath, her mind racing. She knows she is being watched. She has to make it 5 blocks to Madame Fournier's laundromat without betraying the 3 kilograms of priceless intelligence hidden beneath her dirty towels. Section 1. The Domestic Front. André stepped onto the pavement, the sound of her worn leather soles oddly loud in the quiet street. The wicker handle of the basket dug into her palm, a painful, necessary reminder of the danger. She knew the protocol. Move with the rhythm of the city, not against it. She was not a courier. She was a housewife on her way to the lavoir. The Citroën traction. Avant glided past her, slow and purposeful. She did not look directly at it, but her peripheral vision registered the unnatural stillness of the occupants. She recognized the model. It was often used by the Gestapo for quiet surveillance. Her contact, a young resistance fighter named Marcel, should have cleared this route. His failure was not a mistake. It was a sign the net was tightening. Richter, in the Citroën, narrowed his eyes. "She walks like a peasant carrying water," he muttered to his driver, Unteroffizier Heinz. "Too careful. But the basket is too heavy for laundry alone. Hold back, Heinz. Let her lead us to the drop." André rounded the corner onto Boulevard Victor Hugo. The streets were busier here, offering the crucial cover of human traffic. The contents of her basket were a masterpiece of espionage tradecraft. The base layer was indeed dirty laundry, damp cotton to disguise the weight and absorb any telltale rustle from the wax paper. The cipher materials were protected by a double-layer waterproof silk pouch, then meticulously placed inside a sealed tin, which was, in turn, wrapped in a bundle of tablecloths. To the touch, it was merely a dense lump of fabric. She calculated the distance: 3 blocks until the laundromat. She had a secondary plan: the old coal chute leading to the cellar of the vacant bakery on Avenue du Roule. If the surveillance became active, she would feign a stumble, drop the basket near the chute, and kicked the tin into the darkness. A desperate move, but better than capture. A group of German soldiers marched past, their hobnailed boots drumming a heavy, inescapable rhythm on the cobblestones. Fell gendarmerie, armed with MP-40 submachine guns. André dipped her head slightly in the accepted gesture of submissive acknowledgement, allowing the brim of her hat to shield her eyes. The scent of their tobacco and leather was overpowering. One of the soldiers, a tall young corporal, glanced at her, then dismissed her as another anonymous Frenchwoman. This was the strange, terrifying existence of the SOE's most vital assets. Men and women who lived inside the belly of the beast, disguised by the mundane. André's husband, Henri, recruited by the British in 1941, had trained her himself. He was now operating deep in the free zone, and her role was to be the bridge, the post box, the unassuming point of vulnerability. She was essential and entirely alone. She was 1 block from the laundromat when the Citroën accelerated, pulling abreast of her on the opposite side of the street. It was no longer a shadow, it was a cage. Richter leaned slightly forward, his gaze fixed on her hands gripping the basket handle. The moment of silent confrontation lasted a terrifying second. Then, a new sound cut through the tense quiet. The insistent clatter of a newsboy's bicycle bell. Section 2. The Interception. The newsboy, a skinny 10-year-old named Emile, swerved precariously close to the Citroën, yelling the day's headlines, mostly official German communiques, in a shrill, distracting voice. It was a well-timed, if unintentional, diversion. Richter cursed under his breath, leaning back slightly to avoid the sudden proximity of the boy. The brief interruption gave André the fractional advantage she desperately needed. She did not break her stride. Instead of continuing toward the lavoir, where she was expected to meet Madame Fournier, the actual courier, she veered right, directly into a small, crowded boulangerie called Le Fourni. The shop was warm, smelling of yeast and burnt sugar, and mercifully filled with patrons queued for their bread ration. Richter reacted instantly. "Stop! Heinz, the back!" he snapped. But the Citroën was already blocked by an elderly woman pushing a heavy market cart. He threw open his door and, adjusting his coat, walked swiftly toward the boulangerie entrance. He knew the goal had shifted. Not the drop site, but the basket itself. André pushed through the queue, offering quick, apologetic nods. She made straight for the rear of the shop, where the narrow, curtained door led to the private residence upstairs. She knew the baker, Monsieur Dubois, was a sympathizer. He routinely left small, coded messages in the crusts of his loaves, but she could not risk implicating him. She reached the back door just as Richter entered the shop, his presence a sudden, cold intrusion. The crowd, sensing the tension, fell silent. "Madame," Richter called, his French perfect but carrying the hard, clipped edge of authority. "Your attention, please. A matter concerning your husband's tax affairs. We merely require a moment." André stopped, slowly turning around. She made sure her expression was blank, confused. She clutched the laundry basket to her chest like a shield. "Tax affairs, monsieur?" she replied, her voice shaky, performing the role of the intimidated civilian. "I do not understand. My husband is away for work." Richter advanced, a predatory smile touching his lips. He ignored the dozen watchful eyes in the room. "The large basket, madame, if you would just put it down. Perhaps we can review the documents together." As he took a second step toward her, André noticed the precise angle of his shadow. It intersected with the shadow of a heavy, brass cash register. In a move that belonged on a drill ground and not a bakery floor, she lunged sideways, not toward the door, but behind the stout baker who was now trying to intervene. "Leave the lady alone, Bosch," Dubois cried out, his voice shaking. Richter cursed and lunged. André acted on instinct. With a sharp twist of her body, she lifted the heavy laundry basket high and swung it, not at Richter, but at the wall-mounted wooden shelf holding loaves of fresh, warm baguettes. The wicker base connected with the shelf with a loud, sickening crack. The shelf collapsed. Hundreds of crusty, hot loaves tumbled down, creating an instant avalanche of bread. The force of the impact jarred the heavy cash register, and with a terrible scraping sound, the brass box toppled forward, hitting Richter squarely on the shoulder, sending him stumbling back against the counter. It was enough. In the half-second of chaos, the sight of Richter reeling, the sound of falling bread, the gasps of the patrons, André sprinted through the curtained door, slamming it behind her. She did not look to see if Richter was following. She could not. She had a new, terrible realization. The contents of the laundry basket were no longer secure. The blow she struck to the shelf had been necessary, but it may have cracked the internal tin, jeopardizing the integrity of the crucial cipher codes. Section 3. The Broken Seal. André found herself in a cramped, dark hallway that smelled intensely of yeast and flour dust. She could hear Richter's heavy, booted footsteps crash through the curtained door behind her, followed by a shouted command in German, likely to the driver, Heinz, to secure the back alley. She was trapped in the building. The back door was bolted, reinforced against potential break-ins. She had seconds. Her eyes scanned the small space and landed on the baker's delivery bicycle, a sturdy frame with a large, forward-mounted wicker basket, resting against the wall. Next to it, a stack of empty flour sacks. She threw the laundry basket onto a wooden bench. Ignoring the stinging pain in her palm, she worked with frantic, surgical precision. The top layer of damp sheets was stripped away. She tore through the layers of tablecloths and felt for the internal tin, the vital container holding the B cipher codes. The tin was heavy, dented sharply on one side from the impact with the shelf. She pressed her thumb into the dent and felt a sickening give. The seal was broken. Exposure to air, and worse, the internal dampness of the outer laundry, could turn the wax-papered codes to mush. Richter was pounding on the interior door. "Open this, you French pig, now!" André knew she couldn't simply abandon the laundry basket. If Richter found it empty, he would know the contents were gone and intensify the hunt for her. The basket itself had to continue its journey, even if only as a decoy. The sheer, audacious simplicity of the plan hit her. A swap. With one hand, she ripped the damp tablecloths away, seizing the now compromised cipher tin. With the other, she grabbed a handful of the heavy, empty flour sacks and stuffed them into the base of her own laundry basket, adding the damp sheets back on top. It restored the weight, the density, and the domestic appearance. She was now left with the tin, the most wanted item in German-occupied Paris, in her hand. It was too large for a pocket, too heavy for her purse. The back door lock rattled violently, the wood beginning to splinter. Her gaze fell on the baker's delivery bicycle. The front basket was wide and deep, filled with a clean linen cloth used to cover the bread. She lifted the linen, placed the dented tin inside, and covered it again. She glanced at the bicycle itself. It was far too conspicuous for an escape. It screamed, "Delivery boy," not "housewife." She looked at the laundry basket again, the most beautiful, most dangerous domestic object in Paris. Richter put his shoulder to the door, and the lock shrieked, giving way. The door flew open, hitting the wall. Richter stood there, panting, gun drawn. His eyes went immediately to André, then to the laundry basket on the bench, then to the bicycle. His mind worked through the options. She'd tried to hide the contents. "The basket," Richter said, leveling the Webley at her chest. "Walk away from the basket, madame." Andre did exactly that. She stepped away from the laundry basket, hands held slightly away from her body. The basket contained nothing but flour sacks and dirty linen, a perfect decoy. "It is only my washing, monsieur," she said, her voice steady now, devoid of fear. Richter did not look at her. His focus was solely on the basket. He walked past her, reaching out a hesitant hand, then grabbing the wicker handle. He felt the weight, the convincing heft. His smile was cold, victorious. "Then your husband's tax documents must be very heavy indeed." He spun around to look at Andre, but she was no longer there. In the second he was distracted by his prize, she had vaulted over the delivery bicycle and was already through the back door, now open and leading into the rain-swept service alley. She was running, but she had left the codes behind, hidden in the basket of the baker's bicycle, disguised not by dirty laundry, but by the very symbol of French domestic normalcy, fresh bread. Section 4. The Swap and the Pursuit. Andre burst into the narrow, refuse-strewn alleyway. The air was colder here, smelling of stale food and damp stone. She knew the layout. A maze of interconnecting service passages designed for coal deliveries and trash collection. Her goal was the main road, but she couldn't risk the exposed intersection. She had successfully duped Richter, but his realization would be brutal and swift. Back inside the cramped hallway, Richter ripped the top layers of sheets from the laundry basket. His triumphant expression froze as his fingers met the rough, distinctive texture of empty flour sacks. The weight was correct, the look was perfect, but the contents, the priceless cipher material, was gone. He hurled the basket against the wall, the wicker shattering. "The bicycle! Hines! The back alley! The bicycle!" he roared, his voice thick with frustration and mounting panic. Failure to secure this intelligence would mean immediate transfer to the Eastern Front. Or worse. Richter pushed past the terrified baker, ignoring the man's sputtered protests, and scrambled out the back door, drawing his weapon again. Andre was already 3 alleys deep, slipping and sliding on the slick cobblestones. She was not a trained sprinter, and the heavy wool skirt and utility shoes hampered her pace. But her terror lent her a desperate, unsustainable speed. She was nearing a small secondary gate that opened onto the back garden of a large, abandoned Hotel Particulier. It was a gamble. The garden might be a dead end, but it offered concealment. She heard the roar of the Citroen's engine starting up, echoing ominously from the entrance of the alley. Richter must have realized the bicycle was too awkward for her to take, meaning the codes were still somewhere in the building or its immediate vicinity. But he was operating on outdated information. Andre reached the gate, fumbling with the rusted latch. She yanked it open, slipping through, and pulled it shut just as the headlights of the Citroen swung into the alley mouth, temporarily blinding her. The garden was overgrown, choked with rhododendrons and thick ivy. A perfect place to hide, but also a perfect place to be cornered. She pressed herself against a tall hedge, trying to regulate her ragged breathing. The vital cargo, the dented tin, was now resting inside the baker's bicycle basket, itself still within the hallway of Le Fournil, sitting right where Richter had stood moments earlier. The only way for the codes to escape was for the baker, Dubois, to realize their location and act on his own initiative. A tremendous, unfair burden to place on an unwitting accomplice. Andre could only pray he connected her sudden, violent exit with the abandoned bicycle. The Citroen stopped. Richter and Hines emerged, their voices sharp and guttural, as they argued about their search grid. "She cannot be far. Check the perimeter wall, Hines." If she has the codes, she is trying to cross to Rue Guercente, Richter yelled. André gripped the hedge, fighting the urge to flee deeper into the thicket. She couldn't move. Any rustle of leaves would draw them. She had to stay low, wait for them to pass. The rain began to fall harder, a sudden, cold downpour that might work in her favor by masking minor sounds. Then, from the direction of the boulangerie, she heard a sound that made her stomach clench. The squeak of an ungreased bicycle chain. Someone was moving the baker's bicycle. Richter heard it too. He froze, his head snapping toward the sound. "That way, the front street," he barked, recognizing the distinctive mechanical whine. The baker was moving the decoy object out of the alley. André watched as Richter and Heinz scrambled back toward the entrance, abandoning the search of the garden. They believed the bicycle and its heavy basket was the key. She knew that Dubois, seeing the opportunity, was riding the bicycle not to deliver the codes, but to deliver the bread. And Richter was following the decoy. She waited until the engine of the Citroën had faded to a distant drone before crawling out from the hedge. She needed to reach the original drop point, Madame Fournier's laundromat, where the real contact was still waiting. But she had no codes, only the clothes on her back and the memory of where she had left the most critical secret of the French resistance. Section 5. The baker's delivery. André knew she had maybe 15 minutes, tops, before Richter intercepted the baker, Monsieur Dubois, realized the bicycle basket contained only fresh bread, and came tearing back to the boulangerie. She used the time to sprint through the parallel residential streets, keeping to the shadows and adopting the hurried pace of someone late for an appointment, not someone fleeing the Abwehr. Her mind was operating on pure logic. The codes were secure for the moment, hidden by Dubois' routine. The only person who could now retrieve them was her, or perhaps Madame Fournier, the laundress, if André could get word to her. But the laundromat was too exposed. She arrived, breathless, near Le Fournil. The street was agitated. A small cluster of neighbors stood outside the shop, whispering and pointing down the street where the German car had disappeared. Dubois's wife, a woman known for her placid nature, stood weeping silently in the doorway, protected by two older men. André recognized the risk, but she had to confirm the code's status. She approached Dubois's wife, Madame Dubois, offering a handkerchief. "Are you hurt, madame? What did the Germans do?" Madame Dubois choked out a reply, dabbing her eyes. "My husband. They followed him. He went to deliver bread to the Hôpital Américain on the bicycle, and two soldiers in a black car chased him." André's heart seized. The Hôpital Américain was directly opposite Madame Fournier's lavoir, the original planned drop point. Dubois, in his terrified accidental heroism, was heading straight toward the contact. She pressed Madame Dubois's hand. "Your husband is brave. The Germans only want the bicycle. Go inside, keep warm. I must go to the laundromat now. I am late." André moved swiftly toward the lavoir, a deep pit of tension forming in her stomach. If Dubois delivered the bread and the secret tin to the hospital, Madame Fournier might see the opportunity and act. She reached the intersection of Boulevard Victor Hugo and Avenue de Neuilly. The laundromat was across the road. She could see Madame Fournier inside, ironing a shirt near the steaming front window, a placid picture of domestic industry. Then, the Citroën traction. Avant tore around the far corner. It was moving too fast, swerving. It wasn't driving toward the laundromat. It was coming back from the hospital direction, empty-handed. Richter must have intercepted Dubois, found only bread, and realized his grave error. He was returning to the boulangerie for a brutal interrogation, certain that the codes were still hidden there. André darted into the doorway of a flower shop, ducking behind a large display of wilting hydrangeas. The Citroën screamed past, the screech of its tires overriding the drumming rain. She waited 3 full minutes after the sound of the engine vanished before emerging. The street was quiet again, the stillness now unnerving. She crossed the road to the laundromat. The bell above the door gave a small, friendly tink as she entered. The air was thick and humid, with the smell of soap and heat. "André, you are late," Madame Fournier said, not looking up from her ironing board. Her voice was low and steady. She was a middle-aged woman with the strong, corded arms of someone who spent her life working against the stubbornness of fabric. André walked to the far corner, near the large basin used for soaking heavy linens. "I was delayed, madame. Did you see the trouble outside Le Fourny?" Madame Fournier stopped ironing. She put the heavy iron back on its stand with a precise, careful clink. She turned, her eyes clear and unreadable. "Yes, a small excitement." The baker was very agitated about his bread delivery. She nodded toward the basin, where a pile of recently washed, still soaking military uniforms, heavy, dark serge, were stacked, awaiting the wringer. "They are very heavy, these uniforms, very damp. Perhaps you could wring them out for me, André. My arms are tired." André walked over. The sight of the uniforms, soaking in the cold water, gave her a brief flicker of hope. She plunged her hands into the basin, feeling for the cloth. As her fingers grazed the first uniform, she felt something hard and cold beneath the soaking serge. Not the cloth, something else. She grasped the object, pulling it up beneath the cover of the heavy, wet uniform. It was the dented, wax paper-wrapped tin. It was damp, but the outer wrapping, though compromised, had survived. Madame Fournier had intercepted the baker, found the hidden tin in the bread basket during the commotion, and submerged the evidence in the deepest, most inaccessible part of her laundry. A basin of soaking, heavy, waterlogged German uniforms. The Abwehr would never dream of searching there. The codes were safe. Section 6, Transmission and Escape. André pulled the tin free, shaking off the excess water. The weight felt right, and despite the outer dampness, the wax seal around the internal cipher packets appeared mostly intact. She tucked the tin into the folds of a clean apron provided by Madame Fournier, tying the strings tightly around her waist. The heavy protective layers of the cloth offered concealment and kept the metal from clanking. "The drop is the usual," André murmured, her voice barely audible over the hiss of the pressing machine. "Tonight, 2200 hours. Sector Violet, the windmill." "Confirmed," Madame Fournier replied, her eyes focused on a uniform collar she was starching. "But you cannot wait here. Richter will return. You are too hot." André knew she had to disappear entirely. Her apartment was compromised. The Abwehr would be watching it and the boulangerie. She couldn't risk the codes staying in Paris any longer. Her secondary orders were to move the codes to the next stage of the transmission chain. A safe house 20 kilometers south of the city, where a wireless operator was waiting. She looked at the uniform basin. "The search will be intense," she said. "They may return to the WWII." Madame Fournier smiled, a thin, almost frightening expression. "Let them. They will find nothing but clean linen and the smell of soap. They will not look inside the uniforms. They do not look close enough at the lives of French women, André. That is our advantage." André nodded. The resistance knew this core truth. The domestic sphere, the realm of women and children, was the greatest blind spot of the occupying forces, who sought grand, masculine resistance, not ciphers smuggled in dirty laundry. "I will take the 16:30 train from Montparnasse," André decided. "I will need a change of clothes." Madame Fournier moved to the back of the shop, returning with a folded, nondescript gray skirt and a heavy waterproof jacket. Items taken from the lost and found box, deliberately chosen to make the wearer instantly forgettable. Andre quickly changed in the small curtained storage area. She removed her hat, allowing her dark hair to fall loosely, further changing her silhouette. The apron containing the tin was now concealed beneath the jacket. She was no longer the housewife from Neuilly-sur-Seine. She was just another anonymous commuter heading out into the countryside. She embraced Madame Fournier, a quick, fierce hug that conveyed months of shared risk and silent understanding. "Be careful," Andre whispered. "You too, ma chérie," the laundress replied. Andre stepped out of the warm humidity of the lavoir and back into the cold Parisian afternoon. She walked directly toward the metro station, merging instantly with the crowds rushing toward the city center. Meanwhile, Oberleutnant Richter, red-faced and furious, was back at Le Fournil. He had found Monsieur Dubois, beaten him, and received only hysterical denials and the confirmation that the baker had simply delivered bread. Richter's failure was complete. He had allowed the most critical intelligence transfer of the week to slip through his fingers. Hidden first in a laundry basket, then in a bread basket, and finally, right under his nose, in a basin full of his own soldiers' uniforms. Richter stood over the shattered remains of the wicker laundry basket. He was a professional intelligence officer, trained in every field craft of espionage, and he had been defeated by soap, starch, and sheer domestic audacity. Andre was already 3 stops deep into the metro system, the heavy tin pressing reassuringly against her stomach. Her heart rate had finally begun to slow. The codes, the key to coordinating the next major wave of SOE parachutage operations, were on the move. She had risked everything, her life, the lives of her contacts, and the entire fate of the regional resistance, on an improvised swap that hinged on the courage of a baker and the quick wits of a laundress. She had succeeded. Her secret life as a wartime courier, hidden in plain sight, continued.